Chris Pratt's rise from washing dishes in a small-town restaurant to becoming one of Hollywood's most beloved stars is not just a story of fame, it's a lesson in faith, perseverance, and the power of believing when nobody else does. Long before the red carpets, blockbuster hits, and millions of fans, there was a young man living in a van on the beaches of Maui, surviving on hope and leftover food, yet holding tightly to an unshakable dream. Born on June 21, 1979, in Virginia, Minnesota, Chris was the youngest of 3 children in a working-class family that lived paycheck to paycheck. His father, Daniel Pratt, worked in mining and construction, a man of grit, humility, and few words. His mother, Kathy, was a grocery store worker, full of warmth and faith, teaching Chris the values of hard work and gratitude even when life seemed unfair. Chris wasn't born into privilege or connections. He was just a regular kid who loved telling stories, making people laugh, and dreaming of something bigger than his small town could offer. But dreams don't always come easy. In school, he was popular but directionless. He tried wrestling, football, and even theater but never quite knew where he belonged. After high school, he enrolled in community college but dropped out within a semester, admitting later that he didn't see the point. He took odd jobs, selling coupons, working as a stripper, even cleaning cars, but none of it gave him meaning. Deep down, though, Chris knew he wanted to entertain people. He didn't know how or when, but he believed that someday, somehow, he'd make people smile for a living. That belief led him to the unlikeliest of places, Maui, Hawaii. A friend offered him a one-way ticket, and Chris, broke but adventurous, took the leap. He lived out of a van, parked near the beach, sleeping under the stars and living off the kindness of strangers. He later joked that it was the best time of his life. Even though he was homeless, he felt free. In that simplicity, Chris found something powerful: gratitude. He learned that happiness wasn't about money, fame, or luxury, it was about having purpose. And though his purpose wasn't yet clear, the fire inside him never went out. He worked at Bubba Gump's Shrimp Company as a waiter, where he'd entertain customers by reciting movie lines, singing, and making people laugh. He didn't realize it then, but that small stage was his first taste of performance, the training ground for the man who would one day captivate millions. Fate stepped in when one day, while waiting tables, Chris met actress and director Rae Dawn Chong, who was impressed by his charisma and offered him a role in her short film Cursed Part 3. That single encounter would change his life forever. It was Chris's first real break, a tiny step, but enough to set the wheel of destiny in motion. When Chris Pratt first stepped onto the set of Parks and Recreation, he had no idea his goofy, lovable character Andy Dwyer would change his life. What started as a temporary role became the breakout performance that made him a household name. Andy's silly, spontaneous humor came straight from Chris's real-life personality, his warmth, his optimism, and his belief that laughter could heal any wound. Audiences adored him because he was real, imperfect, and unapologetically himself. But while millions laughed at Andy's antics, Chris quietly dreamed of something bigger. Deep inside, he wanted to prove that he could do more than make people laugh, he wanted to inspire them. Hollywood, however, is not known for taking risks. To most casting directors, Chris Pratt was the funny sidekick, the chubby, harmless guy who made you smile but never carried the story. They couldn't see him as an action hero or a leading man. And that stereotype stung. He had the heart, the talent, and the hunger, but not the image the industry wanted. Instead of letting that rejection crush him, Chris decided to rewrite the narrative. He began to transform himself, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. The turning point came when he auditioned for Guardians of the Galaxy. At first, even Marvel executives doubted whether he could pull off the role of Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord. Chris was too funny, too relatable, too unlike the typical superhero archetype. But director James Gunn saw something different, a spark, a balance between humor and heroism that no one else could offer. Chris knew this was his shot. He trained relentlessly, lost over 60 pounds, and built not just a new body but a new mindset. His transformation stunned the industry. Gone was the lovable Andy Dwyer, standing in his place was a confident, chiseled, determined man ready to carry one of Marvel's biggest franchises. When Guardians of the Galaxy hit theaters in 2014, it became a global phenomenon. The film wasn't just a hit, it was a revolution. Chris Pratt's performance as Star-Lord was electric, full of heart, humor, and humanity. Overnight, he went from sitcom star to blockbuster hero. But what truly made his success powerful was how he handled it. While many would let fame go to their head, Chris stayed grounded. He credited his faith, his family, and his past struggles for keeping him humble. "I was once a guy living in a van eating leftovers," he reminded people. "So every day I get to do this feels like a blessing." That humility made audiences love him even more. What came next cemented his status as a Hollywood powerhouse, Jurassic World. Taking on the legacy of one of the most beloved film franchises in history was no easy feat, but Chris delivered beyond expectations. The movie broke records, earning over $1.6 billion globally, and Chris became one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood. Chris Pratt's story is not just about fame, it's about faith, failure, and finding purpose when life gives you nothing but chaos. Before he became the Marvel star known for Guardians of the Galaxy, Pratt was just another struggling young man living out of a van in Maui, Hawaii, surviving on the smallest sparks of hope and humor. He worked at a restaurant, served tables, and cleaned floors, but he never lost his dream of becoming an actor. He once said that he used to stare at the ocean and tell himself, "Someday, people will know my name." At that time, it sounded impossible, but deep inside, he believed. He had faith not in luck, but in his own will to keep going even when nothing worked. When most people around him had given up on their ambitions, Pratt turned rejection into his rehearsal. Every "no" was his reminder that success isn't about instant validation, it's about showing up again and again until life has no choice but to notice you. Then came a moment that changed everything. While working as a waiter at Bubba Gump Shrimp Company in Maui, a customer, actress Ray Dawn Chong, noticed his personality, confidence, and humor. She offered him a small role in her directorial debut film, Cursed Part 3. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it was the door that finally opened. Pratt packed his dreams, moved to Los Angeles, and started chasing auditions like his life depended on it, because it did. But Hollywood wasn't kind at first. He faced rejection after rejection, sleeping on friends' couches and struggling to pay bills. Yet, he never complained. He had a secret weapon, optimism mixed with relentless grit. While others saw setbacks as signs to quit, Pratt saw them as tests to prove how much he wanted this life. He kept smiling, auditioning, failing, and trying again, and slowly, his persistence began to attract the right kind of attention. His first major recognition came from the TV series Everwood and later The O.C., but it was Parks and Recreation that turned Chris Pratt into a household name. Ironically, he wasn't even supposed to be a main character. His role as Andy Dwyer was meant to be temporary, just a funny side character, but Pratt's infectious charm, natural humor, and improvisational brilliance made him impossible to ignore. The audience loved him, and the writers expanded his role. That's when Hollywood began to realize something: this man had star power. Yet what's truly beautiful about this part of his journey is that Pratt didn't become arrogant or entitled. He stayed humble, grateful, and hungry. He was living proof that when opportunity meets preparation, magic happens. Every laugh he earned, every scene he nailed, was built on years of unseen struggle, late nights, and relentless belief. But the real transformation came when he decided to reinvent himself entirely. For years, Chris Pratt was seen as the funny, chubby guy, not a leading man. Chris Pratt's journey from obscurity to global fame isn't just a tale of stardom, it's a masterclass in how unshakable belief can rewrite destiny. When he first arrived in Los Angeles, he didn't have powerful agents or big studios waiting to sign him. What he had was hunger, not just for food, which he often lacked, but for meaning. He believed that success was not a random stroke of luck but the reward for refusing to give up. Every failed audition was a bruise on his ego, but never a wound to his spirit. He learned early that dreams don't die from rejection, they die from the moment you stop trying. So, even when directors told him he wasn't leading man material, Pratt showed up to every casting call like it was his shot at destiny. And that persistence slowly began to shift the energy around him. The universe, as if testing his patience, began to align piece by piece. There's something magical about people who don't give up. They attract miracles. Pratt was one of those souls. Between the endless grind and uncertainty, he never lost his humor. Even at his lowest, he made others laugh, and that became his superpower. In Parks and Recreation, his role as Andy Dwyer captured everything he was in real life: warm, goofy, unfiltered, and full of heart. But behind that laughter was a man who had spent years learning how to stay positive when life wasn't funny. His humor came from pain, his confidence from survival. That's why people connected to him, because he wasn't acting, he was reflecting the light of someone who had walked through darkness and come out smiling. But the most transformative chapter in his life began when he decided to take ownership of his destiny. Hollywood had boxed him into a stereotype, the funny, lovable guy who wasn't meant to headline action films. Yet, Pratt believed transformation begins the moment you stop accepting how others define you. He started training, not just to change his body, but to prove a point, that discipline can silence doubt. His grueling workouts and strict diet weren't just about muscles, they were about mindset. He would wake up early, push himself beyond exhaustion, and remind himself that success is earned through repetition. Slowly, the man who had once been ignored became impossible to overlook. When Guardians of the Galaxy was announced, few believed it would succeed. After all, it was based on a lesser-known Marvel comic. But Chris Pratt, who had been underestimated his whole life, saw himself in that story. A misfit turned hero. He auditioned and blew everyone away. His charm, timing, and emotional depth turned Peter Quill into one of the most beloved characters in the Marvel Universe. The same man who once lived out of a van was now leading a billion-dollar franchise. But here's the most inspiring part: he didn't change who he was. Fame didn't erase his humility.